Welcome to Elevating La Cultura podcast, a space where I talk with Latinas who are passionate about what they do and willing to share their wisdom with others to change the narrative, especially for the next generation. Each season is centered around different topics, but all with a Latina perspective. This is season 2, focused on health and wellness. So vámonos, and let's get into it. Hola! I'm excited to introduce our first guest for season 2. I met Raquel Galan in 2019 through a network in Chicago that I work closely with called Chicago Latina Moms. We met at a coffee shop and then walked to a nearby park with our kids so that we could chat about life and a potential collaboration. I didn't realize we would click on so many levels. I loved her enthusiasm and her thoughtfulness when it came to caring about other people. We eventually planned a whole wellness retreat together with another mom, Isa, who's the founder of Chicago Latina Moms, and that I had on season 1, episode 3. Raquel is a licensed clinical professional counselor, and I'm thankful that she sat down with me to share her story as an immigrant and a mom raising bicultural kids, and to talk about mental health, especially in the year 2020. We recorded this episode at the end of last summer in 2020, so a little bit ago, but I think that everything that she shared is still very relatable today. So please enjoy my chat with Raquel. I'm so excited to bring you a new season with a completely new topic, and my first person as my guest is Raquel. She is a certified school psychologist and a licensed psychotherapist. And yes, I had to write it down so that I didn't mispronounce any of those words. But she is bringing us, starting us off with season 2, where we're talking about mental health, wellness, nutrition, all of the things that really help us take care of our mind and our body. And so I'm so excited to be able to sit down with you and talk about all the things, because we know that this is a topic that needs to be talked about. So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, about your family, what brought you to now?
First, hola a todos, and thanks for having me here. I'm very excited to be part of this project with Karina. And I guess, like, starting off from when I was little, I always been clear I wanted to be in a helping profession. So I think if I wasn't a psychotherapist, I think I would have been a teacher, a nurse, or a doctor. So I always wanted to be in contact with people and make an impact. So I think that's, all the steps I've been taking throughout my life have taken me to the place where I'm right now. And as you were saying, I think it's super important to destigmatize the topic of mental health in the Latinx community, because I think it's been buried and put away for a long time. And I think it's time that we discuss, mental health as part of overall health and wellness.
So why don't you tell us, I know that you are from Spain. Mm-hmm. So tell me about your journey getting from, or did you do your studies in this topic in Spain or here in the U.S.?
So I went to school primarily in Spain. I came to United States when I was 22. So I did my bachelor's and my master's in Spain. That's where all my family is from, and that's where I grew up. I'm part of a single mom household, and I was the first one in my family to go to college. So I think those experiences have shaped me the way I go about life and my experiences. I came right after September 11, when I graduated from Spain, and for a couple of years I was an au pair. I barely spoke any English, so I lived with a family that helped me go to school here again, and I was helping them with childcare. So that was sort of like a cultural exchange sort of setting. And after I did a master in business administration, thinking that was kind of the field that could give me a better job, and maybe it could give me the American dream and more money. So I did that, and then soon as right after I graduated, I realized that really my heart wasn't in corporate America, and I wanted to go back to my roots of, mental health and wellness, and that's what I've been doing since 2004.
Yeah, so did you start the mental health profession in Spain?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then you...
Yes, I did a bachelor and master's in counseling in Spain, and I did my internship there in a hospital, in a preschool, in a school setting. And then here I did a master in business administration, and then I took several other classes in counseling and passed the board exams and all that process too.
So how did that translate for when you started schooling here in the US? Like, was it difficult to continue that education even though you started in Spain?
I think the system also because, granted it was also, I graduated in Spain in 2001, so sometimes it's hard to tell, is the educational system that different or is that just a generation change, right? It's been 20 years almost. I noticed that in Spain, my education and my studies were a lot more theoretical, a lot more memorization. I think in the States it's a lot more hands-on, a lot more practical. I also think it's here is more experiential, so I'm thankful that I can combine both things. And I think I like that I had a different background and a different approach. I think that enriches my what I bring into therapy and into counseling. The ability of knowing that there is a different life somewhere else, that there are different experiences, and most of the people that I work with are either immigrants or second generation immigrants, bicultural, bilingual. So everyone brings a different set of experiences into my office.
I'm always interested and fascinated by like your parents' influence on what you choose to do, because like I talk about this all the time. My father owned businesses, so he set up that entrepreneurial mindset at an early age for me, even though I may not have known. Um, but my father has influenced a lot of what I do now. And so, how did your family in Spain, your siblings, your mom, influence this career path?
So one thing that was ingrained in me from the very beginning is that if I had the opportunity, I should go to college. So I remember maybe when I was 12 or 13, all of a sudden I told my dad I wanted to be a hairdresser. And he's like, well, no way, you have the opportunity to go to college. You go to college, and then if you want, you go to, hairdressing school too. So that it's been always like ingrained in me that I had to take advantage of those opportunities that my parents didn't have, and that was very important for them. So I did that. Never went back to hairdressing school, and know that I maybe shows I didn't have the skills for it. But that is something that I carry with me. The being able to realize the opportunities that you have and to take advantage of that, and then once you have the skills and the education, do what you can to impact the world with that. It is interesting that you talk about the entrepreneurship spirit, because I think in my household was almost quite the opposite. Don't take risks. If you have a job that is a steady paycheck and is stable, why to rock the boat? So in that sense, I've been more the adventurous, right? I'm the only one in my family that lives abroad. I'm the only one that is able to work in a different language, or that sort of broke the barriers of leaving a steady job for taking on an entrepreneur's adventure. So that is interesting how in many ways I'm carrying on the message of my family, but in many ways I'm deciding like, well, this is what was given to me, but I'm going to decide to do something else with it.
I like diving into the journey of like our our other generations before us, because like we both have kids, and I feel like it's influenced, like our family before us has influenced like even our parents, and then we are now influencing whether we have stayed on the same path or shifted in any way. We're influencing our children, and I'm always like so fascinated to think about the future and like what are they gonna take from us, what are they going to shift in their own lives. So I like talking a little bit deeper on that. Um, so yeah, thank you for sharing. So I like to talk about how family has influenced, but then also like what they think now about what you've chosen to do. Have you had like uh, any family members, whether it's even like tias, tios, uh, siblings, say anything to you about like, oh, well, you shouldn't do that, or show pride in what you're doing?
So I think my parents, something that I carry with me from them is the work ethics, right, and the values. And I think at first, I moved into a new country. I didn't know the language. I didn't have anybody here. So I think they're sort of the parental protective, mode kicked in them, right? Like making sure I was safe, making sure I was able to find resources, to find a way to sustain my life here. They didn't, they've never lived abroad, right? So I think there were a few years and they were sort of like just more vigilant and more cautious, like, oh, make sure you think about before you do this, make sure that you are able to do this. I think, that shifted a few years back, that they are my biggest cheerleaders and my biggest supporters, and anything that I propose, I tell them I'm going to do, they are like 200% there with me and excited. They are the ones that sort of, supported me when I mentioned I wanted to, quit my job as a school psychologist in a public school to start my own business. So I think that have shifted as they grew more awareness and confidence in that, the message that I'm carrying and the decisions that I'm making are well thought out and have an impact.
Yeah. I want whoever listeners, viewers, to feel empowered by every story that I have um, on this podcast. So I want to dive in a little deeper on your transition between countries, and if you've faced any assimilation or opposition, because I feel like yours is a story that's like you can do this even if you have your background in a different country. You can come and continue your education, you can start a new life, you can learn a new language even though you're an adult. Like the possibilities really are there. You just have to tap into them and believe in yourself, really. So walk me through like your mindset to be able to go from having a career in Spain and then moving to the US.
So I think one of the biggest things that have helped me through this process, because particularly at the beginning, there were many moments where I thought, okay, I'm not cut out for this. This is, this is too hard. I'll better, pack up and go back home when I know things are predictable and I know how to navigate the system. But one thing that have kept me pushing in these situations is been the fact of knowing that there is, that the situation that I find hard at this very moment is just one small peck in a whole, lifespan. Kind of, everything comes and everything goes, right? Also knowing that if I'm in this path is for a purpose, that things don't happen randomly, that there is something somewhere out there that is kind of like helping me find the next step. And also something that I actually use this in the office a lot, is to help people to be comfortable with uncertainty and discomfort. kind of like you don't have to have every answer right now. It's okay to struggle. It's okay to be in the process. Something else is coming out of this, right? So I think that has helped me to keep pushing forward, even though when I was half through my MBA and I realized this is not what I wanted to do. So then I thought, okay, this is going to help me in the future to maybe have a better business mindset, to be able to do my own paperwork, my own marketing plan. So, things don't happen for no reason. So find what is the purpose, what is this moment teaching you, what is the parts of me that are required to show up in this situation, and just trust that, whatever is for you is going to show up your way, that you are never late to your own destiny and your own path. So I think like every time I feel stuck in a moment, I just kind of have to remind myself of that, and thinking there is a reason for this struggle. There is a reason for, these feelings and this situation that I'm sort of modeling in right now.
I love that, especially as I'm a daughter of an immigrant. My father immigrated when he was in his teens, and there's always so much pressure for like whether you're first generation, second generation, but being that first person to go to college, and there's a lot of pressure to graduate, number one, to get a profession or pick a profession that will be income generating.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes, well, when you're at that age where you're in school, I mean, there's a lot that's going on, because if you're an immigrant yourself, or uh, a child of an immigrant, you're living in this moment. So there's one, the pressure of making your family proud, but also living in the space that you're in, and two, trying to figure out who you, or three, trying to figure out who you are as an individual apart from your family. And so there's a lot of pressure for kids to, one, go to college, but also stay in college. And I feel like it's encouraging when someone else is saying, like, sometimes things shift, and sometimes you start going to college for one thing and you realize you don't like it. But even though you feel that pressure to finish that thing and decide to shift later, you can always take the education that you received and apply it to whatever you want to shift to. Um, so, what advice would you give to someone who is in that position to say, like, I don't think I should be going down this path, but I don't know how to make the jump or switch to something else that might be more artistic, or might be more, I don't know, passion driven other than money driven?
Well, that is a really hard question.
Yeah.
Just because we are also living in a country where going to college is a significant, not only time investment and effort investment, but monetary investment, right? So there is always that pressure of like, don't graduate with a ginormous amount of debt that is going to follow you for years, right? But also, like, an advice I would give to teenagers and young people and parents is to let your kids explore. Let them participate in different after school curriculum. Expose them to different things they want to do. Do they like music? Do they like dance, art? Even if that's not going to be their career, that gives them a skills and coping mechanism for self-regulation, for wellness, for more positive mental health functioning, and let them explore things that are not goal or outcome driven, right? And that is something that we have as an adult also a very hard time on being able to allow ourselves to have hobbies or interests that are not money making or outcome or competition driven, right? Um, yeah, and also to start thinking from a very young age. And as an adult, there is never really a late time to start doing this. But where is the sweetest spot between what are my skills and what I can learn or what I'm good at, what the world needs, and how I can sustain my life, because at the end of the day you need to, pay bills or buy food or, you know fund your vacation if you want. Where is the sweet spot in the center of those three, circles, right? What I'm good at, or what can I learn, what the world needs, how can I, contribute positively to the world, and how can I make a living. So sort of the center of that is where where you want to be.
Now I want to dive in real deep about mental health as a topic. I did not grow up talking about mental health, depression, anxiety. I didn't know that it was okay to talk about that stuff until I was in adulthood and after I had my children. Can you walk us through the mental health topic in general and why it's so taboo?
Well, I think there has been for generations a stigma on mental health and emotions and feelings. And particularly, I see this in the US in immigrant population. I also see it around motherhood. That kind of trend to really keep things, within yourself, within your household, and not to talk the same way that we talk, that we are going to the dentist or to the chiropractor, right? And that has a, dangerous effect of making you feel that you are isolated, that if you experience any emotional, discomfort, that you are the only one, that there is something wrong with you, that you are, particularly in immigrant population, I find that they are ungrateful, or that they are weak, right? This happens a lot when you have had parents that went through struggles to start a new life here, and you see them overcoming hurdles about jobs, about learning a new language. So all of a sudden, tell your parents you feel sad or depressed or anxious, seems like, you have this, estás loco, o eres un pendejo, o un acomplejado, right? So there is a lot of guilt that, that brings that into the person that is struggling with those symptoms. I always see emotional health as being part of, a holistic approach of who you are, right? So many times when I talk to parents, for example, about their child, benefiting from therapy or from, medication in some instances, there is always that fear of like something is wrong with my child, or this is going to be forever. Did we do anything to cause this? And then when I sort of approach it the same way that you would approach if your child gets a cavity, right? Or if your child needs glasses, you would not tell your kid like, well, just work extra hard and maybe you are able to see, in class, right? So kind of saying like, you would not do that if your kid needs glasses, right? Why would you do that if your kid needs therapy or could benefit from, some other supports? So sort of like integrating emotional and mental health into overall wellness of who we are and how we go about life.
Yes, and I'll share my uh, story with my therapist and medication. It's not something that I've shared publicly. I am sharing to a lot of people right now. But after I had my second, Elias, I was going to like my postpartum checkup. Mm-hmm. And the person comes in and does the interview. I had a midwife, and she asked me, she's like, okay, I'm gonna just go through some questions, the basics, like how much chocolate do you have, do you drink, do you smoke? And then she said, do you ever think about, I forget what the questions were, but it was trying to figure out like on the scale, like how depressed I was or how anxious I was. And I was answering honestly, but I didn't think anything of it. I was like, oh yeah, sometimes I feel like hopeless, or well, sometimes I want to sleep forever, but isn't that normal? Because it was so normalized in my family. Like, oh yeah, sometimes you'll feel sad, but if you just work hard enough, you can pull yourself out of it. And so I was like, oh yeah. And then someone else came into the room and they're like, we should really talk about these answers. And I was like, why? Like, isn't this normal? Mm-hmm. And she's like, well, I'm going to suggest some medication for you and maybe you should see a therapist. And I was shocked and I was like ashamed, but at the same time I was like, maybe I do need something to help, because I could see that my temper was very short, that I felt like after a few hours I was done, and so I called some people and I was like, what do you think of this, me taking medication? And there were some people that were some family members that were like, you know what, this is, I take this, or this has really helped me during this time. And then there were other family members that were close to me that were like, no, this is going to be like on your permanent history, and maybe insurance is going to go up, and who's going to pay for your sessions. And so it's very hard to deal with it if you're the first person like in your family to go to a therapist or even take medication. So I definitely relate, but I want to get your opinion on why you think there's that. I know that you said earlier that sometimes we, as well, I'm a millennial, so I feel like, oh well, what I'm dealing with can't possibly be as bad as what my parents had to struggle with and the things that they lived through. So maybe I'm just making too much of a big deal about this small little thing. If my mom could stay at home and raise 2 kids and she was a great stay-at-home parent, why can't I do the same thing? So what I feel like it's a topic that is like in the millennial generation, I hear a lot of my peers talk about that tension between knowing that they need some help or support, but also not wanting to tell their parents or talk about that with their parents. What is your opinion on that tension that millennials feel, or how they can push through that?
You just in like a couple minutes touch on so many things that I see are very important, that I'm gonna go to the one that you mentioned about how to navigate the process between, am I not being resilient enough, or like, do I really need to share this need for support that I have right now, right? And there is a lot of thoughts and stigma around, when, you are not having thick skin, right? When it's like you are making too much of an issue. And the way I like to clarify this is that, past generation, most of our parents, they were more in a really survival mode, right? Like their worries, when you look at the, Maslow's hierarchy, right? Their needs were at the bottom, right? Do we need a house? Do we need to send our kids to a school? Do we have enough income to put food on the table, right? That was the case for many, many families. So thinking about, what do I want to do with my life? What type of profession do I want to be in? Who do I want to be dating? That was not even in the picture, right? Like, you couldn't really get to that until some of your more other basic needs were met, right? And in many cases, it was not even a choice, right? Like, getting married within the heteronormative, realm, having kids, many of our parents didn't even have a choice or a say in that. They just sort of follow the path, right? So having choices, like many of our kids or ourselves, that we have choices, that also brings big responsibility and big anxiety of what I do with all those choices, right? And when I'm uncomfortable not knowing what I want to do, when I'm uncomfortable with, modeling through this sadness that, something happened in my dating life or in my school life, right? And I think the millennials are doing a much better job in normalizing therapy as part of, like, you go for your dentist checkups, you go and check your eyes. So how are you doing checking on with your emotions, right? So I think that it's, I kudos to you for sharing your story, and that's what we need more of, sharing stories and normalizing that this happens, right? Like, about 20% Latino teenagers have considered suicide and are struggling seriously with mental health issues. Out of those numbers, only 1 in 4 Latinx would ever consider going to a therapist, right? So adding those numbers, and also knowing that Hispanic and Latinx community are the ones in the U.S. more likely to not be insured, which that also brings another topic about the capitalization of, mental health and healthcare in general. That leaves, many Hispanic families and Hispanic teenagers in a really difficult place to navigate in terms of, um, accessing mental health supports or medication if needed.
Yeah. I also know from my own experience when I was taking medication, it was never like, I really am thankful for the people that were in my life, because even the midwife who, or the doctor who prescribed the medication, she said, this is just to help you in this season. It was never like a long-term thing.
Mm-hmm.
She was very clear that this was not like a life sentence, that I didn't have to think about it that way. And I think a lot of people do think like, oh, once I'm on medication, like, that's it, I'm going to be on it for the rest of my life. And there are,
for some people, might be.
yes, but I feel like taking the medication in partnership with a therapist really helped to
support you through those times.
Yeah.
And I also think in the case that in your situation that you share, I think we can do a much better job as a community and society to support new moms, right? Like, when you have a baby, everybody wants to hold the baby, but who is holding the mom, right? And in many countries, and I think, many Hispanic countries, many Asian countries, they do have this support network, right? And then that helps you to sort of set up the stage, generally speaking, of course, but to have a much more connected and support through your family, through neighbors. There are many countries when, where you have a baby and, neighbors bring you meals, they help you, to take care of your house or take care of your other kids. So that's what I'm talking about when I think about mental health as a holistic approach. Yes, you might need, you might benefit from medication, you might benefit from therapy, but also we need to, as a community, to come forward and support each other in that manner. Like, what can I do for you to help more connected and more supported? So if you are having, I don't know, intrusive thoughts, that's something that happens postpartum a lot, right? That you are open to tell your neighbor about, or to tell a friend, or to have company, so you don't feel that you are alone with a baby that is cute but pretty, demanding and not interactive. So you don't, you feel that there is a support. They say here, like, it takes a village,
yeah.
But sometimes it's hard to find that village.
Yeah, for sure. So shifting from my postpartum mental health journey, we are coming out of 2020. We have experienced a collective trauma as a global community, as a country in the U.S., but also, like, specifically the Hispanic and Latinx communities have experienced a lot during, like, not just in 2020, but over the last 4 years. How have conversations shifted in your work, or how do you anticipate them shifting coming out of a pandemic, 2020, the political climate in the U.S.?
Mm-hmm. So I think I always like to say that this is what you were saying. We are undergoing a collective trauma experience, right? And this has made even more real that we are all going through the same storm, but we are not all on the same boat, right? And I think this whole pandemic, stay at home, has brought even more disparities between, who has the jobs that allows you to work from home and have your income intact, who has the jobs that, exposes that person and therefore the whole family to being out and about, right? Because you need to put food on the table. Who has those jobs that have been more significantly impacted, right? And also, who are the people that have been sort of forced to get out of the job place because they need to take care of the rest of the family, right? And as you were saying, I think the Latinx community has taken a huge burden on this, on the fact that many people are uninsured or underinsured, that many Hispanic family members have jobs that require them to be out there. So that means like bringing more exposure to this virus. And also many of the families, and particularly women, who have been like left with no choice but to step out of the workforce to be at home with their kids and all that. And I think that is going to, the impact of this is gonna take over a generation to sort of go back to what we had before. When you were talking about the socio-political climate, that has been another sort of like a more slower burning trauma, right? A lot of communities have felt like gaslighted, right? How can we have somebody that is in power saying that is making the best decisions for the country, but I don't see myself in those decisions? Or if I see myself being negatively impacted, right? Or insulted or diminished, or so I think it's been like very slow, like trauma. And I do see, I hear, people talking about that, talking about, I work primarily with women too, and what has been the impact of that narrative, right? That like toxic masculinity about what are the roles of like men and women, how are you supposed to conduct your life, who has more value. That has been a big one, right? I think this has sort of a stamp us again and again about who has the most value in this society, right? And generally it's like white men who makes the decisions for the rest of the people. So I think yes, we've been having a lot of conversations about that. Sometimes therapy sessions transform into like, this is a heavy backpack and load I'm carrying on my shoulders. I need to talk to you about this. And am I being too sensitive? Am I being, gaslighted here? Am I, how do I explain this to my kids? How do I explain that values and character matters?
And I feel like I didn't realize I was carrying any trauma, or as much trauma as I had been carrying until recently. I mean, coming out of this year and the changes that will be happening going into 2021, I have just felt it's that tension again between being relieved that there might be change coming in the future, but then also back to the anxiety, saying like, oh, well, maybe it won't change that much. Maybe it'll still be the same. Or like there's that tension between understanding the privilege that I have and knowing how I can help those communities that might not have the same privilege to be able to stay at home with my kids and work from home, and having a spouse that works from home. How can I then take my privilege and give back or help those who need it during this time of job loss or income loss. Yeah.
So that has come up very often too in therapy, and I see that anxiety and sort of despair on knowing that there are a lot of things that I could be doing and feeling anxious whether I'm doing enough, what can I do from my house in my neighborhood. So some of the things that we discuss is that there are, what are the things within sort of like your control bubble and what are things that are out of your control, right? So out of your control, it could be the weather, the climate, could be whatever the president says, could be, how people interpret your actions or your words, but like put the focus on what is within your control bubble, right? What are some of the things you can do as a mom, wife, neighbor, daughter? You can be reading books to your kids that support those values. You could be supporting a local business by, increasing your purchases through them, right? You can do, you can carry on your message by, supporting any campaigns or any donations. So focusing on all the things that are within your, area of control, because it's very hard to really stay focused and to be able to put our energy when we feel there are so many things going wrong that are like way of our hands that then we tend to freeze, right? So I always go back to like what is within my control. Maybe my control is if my kids are going to a birthday party, I'm gonna choose to gift some books that support that message about women in different roles, about different types of communities. So that is, I think, where is our power to be able to shape next generation. Yeah, the elections have changed something from the last 4 years, but there is still, we are confronted with the reality that so many people still want that narrative. So this is gonna take time. And I feel like, sometimes the power is not what I do at the Washington, D.C. level, but it's what I do within the four walls of my home, right? Who am I raising? What are those girls going to be able to do in the future?
Yeah, I think it's good to be reminded that you can't change everything right now, because going back to I'm a millennial and I want everything to happen like now. I want to be able to be successful in my business right now. I want to make an impact right now. I want my kids to be empowered right now. But like you said, this is generational. It's going to take time to see significant shifts and changes in conversations, in relationships, in the political, the political narrative in this country. So it's really good that you said that, and it's encouraging to know that it's not up to me, one person, to change something that's huge. And something that I can't really.
But you're
change.
raising a boy, right? So like maybe your power is on raising a boy that 20 years from now thinks that is not okay. Some of the things that we have been listening.
Right. Yes, and the conversations that we've had are really good, because I tend to focus on like girl power and empowering my daughter to do anything, because I have a sister, so those are the messages that I heard from my parents. But now raising a boy, being able to have the conversations. I remember we were driving and he's like, why are all these songs that we listen to all about girls and girl power? And it was a conversation that I didn't know needed to happen. And it was like, well, up until like now, everything has been centered around the male, and we're trying to shift that narrative to give females that empowerment. And he's like, oh, okay. I said, you might not understand or see it now, but men have it a lot easier in this country than women do, and we want to be able to equalize that. So yes, it's in the conversations that that we're showing our kids, and even like watching the news and the inauguration or the people that were up for election, being able to talk about the differences between those figures, and also it was just really nice hearing him cheer and be excited about a woman who is going to be in a political role in power, and he was like yes, and being able to cheer on his sister when she does something and encourage her in her choices is huge.
So one of the things that I'm glad that you are bringing up that topic, because some of the things that I've been always sort of helping people feel comfortable and practice some self-compassion towards is being able to be okay with different set of feelings, right? Things are not either all this or all that, right? I might be thankful that I have food on the table and I have a stable job when I see others around losing their jobs, but also I might feel unmotivated by how long this is, taking to evolve, by, my kids are having whiny. So that is okay. Being able to know that you are allowed to have different feelings and not to feel guilty because you have some feelings when you see other people having it worse, right? It's not a who has it worse Olympics, right? But when you were mentioning about your son, this brings me also a thought about I don't want to see female or male as sort of opposites. I think in this rhetoric and this messaging that we've been having over the past 4 years, but also from generations, also I think men lose in this narrative too, right? I see them as many times as victims of a system and an educational system that has not allowed them to be attuned to their emotions, that has not helped them be connected with who they are and see women as equal partners, right? So I when Elias was sort of mentioning about why we always listen to music of girls, your power in there is have to raise a son that is okay with feeling his emotions. I always joke about how many men are emotionally constipated, right? How do you want to raise a son that is okay feeling his feelings and is okay with with not always having that competitive edge or that winning edge, right? And I think that is going to really help him to be able to navigate relationships and his future in a kinder way. I see a lot of men suffering from stress and anxiety and depression because they don't want to, or they are not able to fulfill that sort of male stereotype in many aspects.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that, because that needs to be said. It needs to be out there. In raising a son, I know, well, talking about my own lived experience, like being the oldest, I was made fun of for having feelings, whether it was being upset or crying. And so I know how that has impacted my emotional well-being now. And so I have talked about that with my kids, and I say, you know what, it's okay to cry, whether I'm talking to Elias or whether I'm talking to Elena. And Elena recently said, I feel bad when I cry. Like I feel like I shouldn't cry, that I shouldn't. And she said, because you don't cry. And I then had to unpack and say, you know what, this is why I don't cry, because I was made fun of when I cried. Sometimes I wish I could cry because it just feels good to let it out. I talked about the what's happening in your body when you're able to cry, and I said, so I never want you to feel bad. I've never said it's bad when Elias cries, when you cry. Like, I understand you need to let your emotions out, whether I'm talking to you or whether I'm talking to Elias. Yes, and so I do want to be able to change that narrative for my kids so that neither one of them make fun of each other for showing emotion, because I know how I felt and how it's impacted me now in my relationships and how I communicate with other people, that I feel like that constipation, like not being able to release my emotions and just letting it bottle up, and what that does to my anxiety.
That is very cultural, because many times, and I this happened in my household, so I probably is not the only household, right? But like many times, if you would say like, oh, I feel this, I don't know, I'm sad, or I'm so upset this happened, and then your mom is like, oh, mija, I'm sure that you are exaggerated, I'm sure it wasn't that bad, or like kind of spin it around, that makes you grow up almost like self-doubting your feelings, like, well, I'm upset, but I really shouldn't be upset, or I'm jealous, but it's bad to be jealous. So sort of like helps us become kind of detached and disconnected from our emotions, and experience some of those as a bad thing, instead of like the crying incident, instead of saying like, how beautiful is that I have this body, that when I feel overwhelmed and sad, kind of can my body can clean itself, and I can relieve some of that sadness. So always kind of spin around the feeling guilty for feeling grateful, or embracing how your body and your mind and your heart is reacting to it.
Yeah, that's a good piece of advice, to spin it. Instead of feeling guilty, feel grateful for what your body is feeling, can do. Yeah, that's good. I want to shift and talk about how 2020 has impacted you and your business personally, and what you have done to kind of, well, in the past, 9 months now, have done during this time.
Was March 13th, Friday. I remember when we got the email about our schools closing.
Yes.
I work part-time as a school psychologist in a public school where my daughters go to. And also I work part-time in my own business, my private practice. So it was very curious to see how many of the work at the public school district sort of shut down for a few weeks. Everything went online, meetings. My main role there is evaluate students to see if they have attention deficit disorder, or learning disabilities, or autism. So some of those things we were sort of on pause for several weeks, because we didn't know how to do that online, right? But then all of a sudden my private practice filled up. So I remember like opening some spots, and in 2 weeks getting tons of emails, and then having to sort of send, an automatic email saying like, oh, sorry, but I'm at capacity. And hearing the same thing from many of my colleagues. So in one hand, this has shown how, again, like we are all not on the same boat, and this has like, exacerbated some of the disparities that we have in society in terms of jobs, in terms of access to resources. I do see a lot of people now taking advantage of accessing mental health supports and therapy, because many of them are working from home. So that allows for more flexibility. I have, a few moms that are able to attend therapy just because they are at home, so they don't have to worry about the schedule, about childcare, about commuting. So that has been a great opportunity. Um, and also, as myself in my personal life, my kids are at home. So I'm sort of, I have to apply myself that whole concept that I was talking about, being grateful for having a job that I love, and having, financial access to a paycheck, right? But also feeling exhausted as a mom, right? I think I have baked banana bread like 525 times. We are sort of like almost in pajamas all day, but then laundry keeps piling up. So sort of those realizations, like being okay with experiencing a different spectrum of feelings in a given day, right? And always when I think about my resilience and the resilience of my kids, I always think it as an elastic band, right? So I feel these days that elastic band is sort of quite stale, and many times like a small incident, a small thing kind of like snaps, right? So things that in the past we were able just to navigate through and not being a big deal, these days I see that my kids' emotions are a lot more, um, you know, exacerbated. And many times we have to navigate through emotional situations over very small things. And I hear that from some parents too, seeing a little bit of that uh, volatility, right? Like, emotions are all over the place in within 1 hour.
Yes, I feel like a lot of adults, because they didn't have the skills to cope with emotions before, and probably because as adults in our society, we're always so busy.
Mm-hmm.
We're always doing something, whether it's for ourselves, for work, for our kids, and then come a pandemic and everything stops, and you're sitting there with your emotions, not knowing how to deal with them, and then also your kids' emotions and your spouse emotion. Uh, and then I know a lot of my peers cope with it with like an increase in wine, an increase in, well, in my case, tequila,
Okay.
an increase in beer, an increase in sweets. I know I baked almost every other weekend since like April. Um, so yeah, we're coming out of this and realizing maybe I do need the skills to know how to cope with my own emotions or regulate my own emotions, and then also how do I help my kids or the people that are in my house. It's not always just kids, it might be parents, grandparents in the house as well. um, so yeah, it's funny that you talk about that, um, that coping, like how do we do that?
I'm a big believer of taking care of the people that take care of the people, which means in this case, the adults in the home, right? And many times I discuss like what are some things that you can do to regulate yourself because your kids don't have anyone else, right? So they are always mirroring on how are you showing up in their lives, right? So in the past, they were able to do that through friends, through teachers, through whatever classes they took, through whatever neighbors they play with. Now you are their only like sounding board. So that has increased our responsibility on being able to show up with, in a mature way, in a healthy way. So what are we doing ourselves as parents or adults in the home to make sure that we are calm, that we are, able to pay attention to our emotions and do something with it because they are feeding of that, right?
Yeah, so I guess it's a positive thing that your roster has filled up because you're able to help more people through that. Have you had to change anything in the way uh, that you do your sessions?
Well, I took everything online, and basically in June I didn't renew the lease of my office. Now everything is online, so this has also helped me think that is this the lifestyle that I want? Because for me, I think I'm able to reach out to a lot more people by having sessions online. I see clients in Florida, in Illinois. I'm able to be a lot more flexible with my schedule, right? Before I had to, get dressed, get ready, commute to my office, find parking, all that. Now I'm able to find hours during the day here and there. And yes, takes me 2 minutes to put on a nice sweater and to open my laptop and, be ready to work. So I think this has allowed me a lot more flexibility and the feeling that I'm able to reach out and help a lot people, other people that in other circumstances would not have been able to come to my office. So for that, I'm very thankful, and also allows me more flexibility to be with my girls. Maybe I can work a couple hours and take an hour off and then go back to work 1 hour. Before I could not be doing that. So that has been a really positive moment. And also, by working with others helps me to also normalize my own experience as a person, right? When I have a client saying, oh, this is too much, we are just stepping on each other all the time at home. I marry my husband for breakfast and dinner, So I don't wanna, this is too much time together or talking about their kids. I sort of relate to many of those experiences. And I think that is what also they like about working with, with someone like me, that, we are normalizing the experience and makes you feel less alone.
Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to get a little personal and ask you what your mental health practice has been during this time that you've been home, shifting your business. What are you doing to help yourself?
So I know this might sound a little bit repetitive when I go back to the whole, holistic approach, but I always think about, if, my mind and my body working together, right? So some of the things I've been implementing and thinking about is, how does my body function better and respond better, right? And to make sure I sort of follow some basic, routines, right? So some of the things that I do is to have meals on a pretty set schedule, right? Make sure I have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Make sure that I sleep at least 8 hours. Make sure that every day I change into more normal clothes. And this varies. I'm not saying this is what you need to do, but I found that is helpful for your own brain to sort of have that separation between is acting and working time versus is resting and sleeping time, right? So even if it's very casual leggings or a t-shirt, but changing, giving your brain the message that now we are active and we are doing something else than sleeping. Trying to control my social media and screen consumption. And I know that is very hard because one of the things that brings me joy these days is many times scrolling Facebook and reading memes and watching jokes or videos. But many times I have to, either set an alarm, kind of, okay, after 15 minutes is done and I'm gonna take a shower or make lunch or help my kids with e-learning. Also, like every day to sort of have some, a purpose and make sure that I'm intentional about doing something that is good for my body. And that could be take a bath, go for a walk, drink my 8 glasses of water, cook a healthy meal, what I do to acknowledge and be grateful and take care of my body, right? Also, another thing is to connect. Who am I connecting with that it's in the home and outside the home? Making sure that I exchange a few messages with my parents, I call a friend, I send a birthday, joke to somebody, I connect doing a craft with my kids, like, taking care of my body, connecting with people in and outside the home, and also have a purpose for the day. Like today, what is something learned that I knew or I tried? And doesn't have to be anything fancy. Sometimes it's reading a chapter of a book, sometimes it's watching a documentary, reading an article that someone sent me. So to recap is, what do I do for my body that is good? Can be something super simple, how I'm connecting with those around me, and what am I doing to sort of stimulate my brain? Something new that I learned, something that I read, something that I watched that I didn't know about before. So sort of keep a purpose for each day and take each day at a time, not planning. So, every night I think about what are the things that I have intended to do next day, but that's about as far as I plan.
Yeah, no, that's so good. I've been like trying to remember all the things that you said because I feel like the self-care talk has shifted over this past year into like just saying like, oh, well, self-care, go out and do your nails, get a mani-pedi or get a massage or spend some time outside of the home where you can enjoy a meal by yourself. But those things have like completely changed because we're always inside our homes and always like now around our families more. And so I love that you said like get dressed or change your clothes so that your body knows that you're going from waking up to work or being awake and then change again so you can get into that relaxation, I'm home, not working mode. That was all that you said was so good.
One of the things that I also talk about is how can you still be on the same roof but allow each other some privacy and some alone time, right? So could be either setting up a cozy corner for one of your kids to read in, could be you stay in the restroom and you take a shower, or you can, kind of think about your house and different spaces, and how can you set up a space or a corner where you can have some time with yourself. Sometimes just putting your headphones and listening to some music or an audiobook that can help you or one of your kids to sort of decompress and have some alone time, which is important. Be respectful of the alone time that you need and your kids need.
Yeah, that's so good. So, what are some limiting beliefs or ideas or patterns that you've had to work through, whether it's in motherhood, whether it's in business, whether it's just in this year, that you've had to kind of push through mentally?
I'd say that's a work in progress, and I think that makes me human too, right? To acknowledge that I'm in the process. So sometimes when I look ahead of what I want to do or where I want to be, I get discouraged, but then I remind myself to look back of how far I come from last year or 5 years ago, and then I sort of feel better where I am in the process, right? But some of the barriers and the mental blocks that I thing I have made progress in is the guilt about feeling that I can be a good mom and a good spouse and a good daughter, and also, have my business and work on my business. So many times I think a lot of women and moms struggling with how to find a balance between all the aspects, right? All the facets of their lives. So that's something that I think I overcome, and I can say that I feel pretty comfortable where I am, about spending time in my business and in work, and also spending time with my daughters and feeling that I'm a influence in their lives, right? That I'm present for them. Another thing that I had to become more comfortable with is the idea of start before you are ready. So many times I work with women that feel like, oh, when I finish that degree, I will start this. When I lose 4 pounds, I will buy a bathing suit. That's a silly example, right? But many times we start putting ourselves into that, when this happens, I will do this. And that is, perfectionism is the biggest roadblock for action. So that is something that I had to, get comfortable with myself on starting before I felt I was 100% ready. Being comfortable with not knowing every aspect of the business or my practice, and being okay with the starting where I am. And I think I think that it could be a good takeaway point for, many of us to start before you feel ready.
Yes, I know a lot of us in the entrepreneurial world, or people who want to start a business, will do everything else first before actually putting it out there. Like, they'll make excuses and say, "Oh, well, I need more of a following, or I need an Instagram account, or I don't have my website. It's not perfect. It's not ready."
Yes.
So that, yes, that's good advice. You need to just do it, or just start.
Begin.
Yes. Yeah, that's good. So what is the most inspiring feedback or piece of advice or encouragement that you received along the way that has really shaped your trajectory in life?
I guess coming from my family and my parents, just hearing from them that I trust you, that I know you can do great things. I trust that you are taking the steps towards, going after your dreams, and that is always, more important than having a stable job, because I remember I alluded to that before, about how I always grew up valuing stability and being in the comfort zone. So now seeing that shift in them, on sort of applauding that, path that I have taken towards doing something that is out of my comfort zone and something that is challenging for me. Hearing that, and also hearing from many times clients, right? Just, oh, I feel a lot more confident since I started working with you. Or I'm being able, I feel confident enough to take a challenge, to take a new job, to, I get out of a toxic relationship just because you are helping me or planting seeds in me to see how I can grow more confident and take charge of my life. I think that's kind of what makes me wake up every day and drives my work.
That's beautiful. Okay, last question. And the reason, like, I ask everyone this question, I feel like I'm doing this and trying to get different stories out there to then help the next generation, to help the next, whether it's the next generation of graduates, the next generation of like kids that like our kids' age, or just like help my peers, the other millennials. I want to be able to share stories to help encourage and help elevate them so that they can then share their stories and maybe be inspired to start their own business or pursue a different profession. So I ask everyone, what is one piece of advice or encouragement that you would send out or that you would give to the next generation? And that could be centered on mental health and wellness.
So I guess I'm not sure if it's a piece of advice, but it's a thought, and something that I would like to people to carry on with them is the thought that you are not alone, and that is a comforting and also it's a responsibility, knowing that that you can ask for help, knowing that the circle that is around you and the circle that you want to grow around you can bring you support emotionally. Sometimes could be around work, sometimes could be logistics of life, but also that you have to nurture that circle. So the fact that you are not alone when you need to ask for support, and also that you are not alone when it's in your place to give, right? In life, I think there are moments of taking and getting in that support and being able to ask for support. That's hard for many of us, but also there are times of giving, times where you can volunteer, help a friend, help a neighbor. So to not nurture and foster that interconnectedness that we have within each other.
Yeah, I feel like especially for young kids, it's important for them to hear that what they have to say has value and like what they have to give also has value. So yeah, so I know I try to encourage my kids to speak their feelings, speak their truth, speak what they're thinking, like their thoughts, ideas, opinions, so that we can have a conversation about that and get down to the reason why, and then empower them to then share that with their friends and with other people. So yeah, so that's really good advice. And yeah, I'm so glad that we had this conversation. I know that like I have wanted to share more about my own mental health journey and having this conversation. I'm glad that we met. When was it? Was it only a year ago? Maybe it was a year ago.
It was about a year ago when we were planning the Chicago Latino Moms Retreat.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes, we met a year ago in the summer, but the retreat I believe was maybe the same weekend that we're meeting now. Yeah. But yes, I valued everything that you brought to that retreat. It was a wellness retreat, and it was then that I realized that so many people, so many moms, so many Latinas needed that space to explore their mental health and to talk to other people and to feel connected, like you said. So I'm really thankful that you took the time to talk with me, to share your area of expertise, your passion. So why don't you share where people can find you on social media or website? Share where they can find you.
So my website is www.redefinetuvida. I wanted to make sure it was in Spanish. redefinetuvida.com. And that's where you have a little bit of my background, my history. I'm always open for a good conversation, for good collaboration. So I'm super thankful that you allow me the opportunity to be here with you today.
Yes, and I do think it's so special that you have your business name reflective of your culture and have that in Spanish, because I feel like that opens that door to other people who are Spanish speakers or who have that background. They feel comfortable coming to you. When I had my therapy experience, it was not with someone who understood my cultural background, and I think being able to speak to someone who does makes a huge difference in that journey. So thank you again for being here.
And sharing the message that you have the power to redefine your life, right?
Yes.
That is, we didn't have any choice on what was given to us, but we have a choice and a responsibility to choose and decide what we want to pass on to our friends, our next generation.
Yes. Oh, that's so good. Thank you.
Gracias, Karina.
Conversation. It was so great to sit down and talk so openly about mental health, something that is starting to become more normalized. I love how she shares how it's never too late to create your own destiny and really helps us start thinking about how we can make small steps towards change by starting within our own home. This was a great interview to start the season with, and I want to give a shout out to Vanessa and Elio from 41 Films, the team behind the camera filming our conversation. Okay, amigos, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share, take a screenshot to post on Instagram at Elevating La Cultura, or send me a DM. You can also comment on this YouTube video if you're watching online. I always like to hear from people and how they resonate with the stories that I share. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day, afternoon, evening, whenever you're listening, y nos vemos next week. Bye!